How are we doing today?
I'm good. Fresh and early on the West Coast.
Nice. Yeah, we got that
Tell me about it, brother.
that
Tell
early
me about
morning
it.
that early morning energy. I love it.
Yeah, totally. I've transformed fully into a morning person at this point in my life. So
Man, we could do a whole episode on that because I think that's my more recent journey as well, and
oh
I'm not
yeah,
sure how I feel about it, to be honest.
it happens. And I've read some statistics about morning people not being as as intelligent as night owls. So I'm a little bit I
I'm
mourn my night owl past, but
I'm
whatever.
living
Yeah.
proof of that.
Aging is aging. Anyways, good morning, guys.
Good morning. So you're an internet theorist, writer, entrepreneur. You're formerly co-founder of New Models and Channel, and you're currently developing
hmm
Cloudy Heart with John Rathman, and you lead Metropolis DAO at Tribute Labs, which is focused on AI investments. So,
Correct.
I mean, I was like, where the hell do we go with this conversation? Like, we could have
Yeah, there's a lot of different hats there.
multiple 3-hour conversations, and we have 15 minutes here. But I think you
Yeah.
call yourself a sloptimist in your Twitter bio. You're building an AI pop star. I've seen you talk a bunch about Italian brain rot. So I felt very compelled to ask you about your takes on the evolution of culture in like an increasingly AI dominated
Yeah.
world.
I figured that's where we would start. And I'm still working on my like pithy definition of sloptimism, which is the whole project ultimately is trying to coin something, which is something I've always, dreamed of doing. I think there's a lot of power in coining things, and I always love portmanteaus. I just think they're a very funny way of kind of envisioning the future or speculating on things. It's just, and so actually in my previous like art career, I I've made a lot of portmanteau word art. But yeah, so sloptimism, I think of the non pithy definition is the Panglossian embrace of the total output of the attention economy. And what that means is sort of, I think of it as being the cultural program for UAC or unconditional accelerationism. And generally my stance about acceleration is that it's happening, and that in broad strokes, we're locked into a certain kind of evolutionary process that is, just baked in by incentives that exist, by incentive structures. And so, we obviously are still live players somewhat in that game, but not not in the broad sense. So we kind of have to just accept the trajectory generally and make the most of it. And I think of sloptimism as sort of that attitude. And so brain rot, the slop reels, all this stuff, which obviously is bad in some regard. Uh, it has, I think, a lot of artistic merit and potential also baked into that stuff, and so it's just about like kind of, embracing that. And I think Italian brain rot is a great example. It's sort of like, I feel like Italian brain rot is like the dream of last cycle's Web3 of collective IP hallucination, but it just kind of happened emergently without, well, at least without crypto incentives. I think there were probably economic incentives that helped it become what it is. Certainly there were. But yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting phenomenon. So anyway, optimism is just like my general attitude towards all this stuff. And also just like a call towards artists to like, engage with it and see what you can do with it, and not just run away in fear. Just try to keep above the API basically in terms of your creative control over your output.
I like that. I find myself identifying with this sort of inevitable evolutionary accelerationism take, and I think we see a lot of pushback on that, or at least on the broader impacts of that, in ways that I think are maybe not ideal or don't resonate with me. But I'm curious, could you steelman the sort of anti-evolutionary accelerationism? I don't know, I can speak words faster than it. Like, what is like the fair critique of this? Because I'm sure it's there, and I don't want
Sure.
to miss
Well,
it.
it's techno determinism. It's I think it probably relies overly on faith in certain types of trends, continuing to be able to be extrapolated on. That would be the stillman there. And so it can go a lot of different ways. Maybe the future is a little bit more higher variance than we account for. I think that is certainly a fair criticism there. That being said, it's like so far it looks like a lot of predictions are kind of, you know, coming true in terms of not just in scaling, but in terms of kind of like downstream cultural impact of all this stuff. It just seems like, you know, even when I came up with the term sloptimism, was like last, I think, November or December, and in the the subsequent 8 or 9 months, you know, I think like AI content on all the social media feeds it must have gone up, you know, I don't know by how many orders of magnitude in terms of the percentage of actual stuff that's being consumed, but it's just undeniably AI generated art or AI mediated stuff is becoming more and more culturally important. And all of the kind of like major memes of the year, not just meme coins, but just like memes, the JD Vances, all these things are the Ghibli. These moments are all kind of like these AI collective visual moments. Italian brain rot, another one. I think this is the first year where that's been the case. There's obviously been these sort of like iconic AI images, like the room where you don't know what any object is. I forget, I don't know what that's actually called, or the avocado chair. But those didn't have like big cultural impact in the same way, you know?
Yes, you mentioned being really interested in the systems engineering layer of cultural phenomena, maybe more than the aesthetic or narrative layer. So I'm curious if this is at the core of your interest in the intersection of crypto and AI, and if not, like what is?
Yeah, I'm always just trying to think about what kind of incentive systems are underlying what's happening, and maybe that's just like a little tism there. I don't know. And for me, it's just like I've said this kind of before, but like if you're, I'm 39, and if you've like lived through that many different like cycles of pant shapes, from like skinny jeans to wide leg jeans to boot cut, that many times, it's very hard for me personally to care that much about any kind of like individual aesthetic trend, because I just see it as sort of like quantum foam on the top of things that is kind of irrelevant. And so I care about aesthetics and stuff like that, but I just, you know, I don't that much ultimately. And this was a challenge as being an artist and being kind of forced to think on both layers when I only really cared about that systems layer, or, you know.
I mean, it feels to me like that the degree that somebody is sort of brings an optimistic take to this space is, or a pessimistic take is sort of the sense of agency we have in these systems. And I like that line, how do we stay above the API? I'm curious just your take on that as a creator artist. Are humans going to have agency in this agentic world? Is the system just going to replace us?
I think it's going to be a constant struggle, basically, and we already, I think you feel that very much especially as like a content creator, where you know, this is not a new thing that you're performing for the algorithm, and audience capture or algorithm capture, see it all the time for sure. And of course, like I'm not immune to it. I don't think anybody is, but I think, yeah, it's just this sort of like, it's going to be a struggle to maintain some level of autonomy when you are going to be just constantly, you know, I don't know, you know, hit with all these sorts of attacks on your autonomy, basically. And that's, yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I'm not sure if that's optimism or not. And yeah, I think there's limited agency. I think there's some though, but yeah, it's not a guarantee, you know.
But it sounds like you don't think this is a completely new thing.
No, definitely not. Like I said, it's just like, you know, I think the development of all this technology is the result of mostly economic or social incentives structures that exist. And yeah, so certainly in the last 10 years, I think like just performing for like Instagram or for social media filters has become, social media algorithms has become such a dominant requirement for any type of creative person, no matter what field you're in. Yeah, it's not a new issue, right? Actually competing directly with algorithms that can produce content without inducing it in people, that's, I guess, new. But that's where it's saying about the API matters. And if you can, you know, I think like botnets are a very interesting artistic media that isn't really been fully things like that, for instance. You know, there's definitely ways to use use the current system, I think, as a palette or something,
Okay, I'd love for you to unpack the botnet opportunity here.
Well, maybe that's too much, but I don't think there's things we could do there. I think if your goal is influencing culture, obviously that has a political component, but that could have a more aesthetic or whatever rationale as well. Not that I'm engaging in anything like that, but I have dreams.
You sort of see it in the Clipper dominance right now, right? Where there's still human beings doing this, but I don't think it's too hard to imagine it going a level far. I mean, I'm sure people are out there doing that. If you have headless creators, how important is the creator actually having a head, even though it's maybe not visible to this model, right? That's interesting.
Right.
I mean, maybe to ground ourselves a little bit more, I'm curious what's getting you guys excited at Metropolis DAO these days from an investment perspective.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, I work at Metropolis as well, and then also at Tribute Labs more generally. And we just launched a new fund, Aiden, Autonomous Deal Investment Network. And that has kind of been the main focus recently. And there's a lot of overlap with what we're looking at Aiden and Metropolis as well. So yeah, I'm not sure if we can talk about any individual investments that we're doing, but in general, it's really cool. I recommend people check out Aiden.online. It's a new agentic fund. It's a brand new fund, new structure. And I think it's also, I mean, one of the things that's more innovative even than the AI diligence, which is really interesting, we can get into that, is just the structure, which is sort of like rethinking DAOs, where anyone can be a network scout that's invited. If you submit a deal and it gets funded, you get 10% of the carry, which is like pretty generous terms. I will say one deal that I've recommended already has gotten funded. So I have seen it happen. It is a real possibility. Obviously I work there, so maybe a little advantage, but I think it's a possibility for any network member. And I mean, DAOs, I've been involved in DAOs for a long time. I know you guys have probably lots of thoughts there. I do think that one of the only use cases for them that where it makes sense is pooling investment into a specific, category. And so, Tribute Labs has done a good job at sort of focusing on, I think, what is the real use case for DAOs, which is, pooling capital and allocating it together. And yeah, Metropolis has been great. This is my first year kind of in VC. And, it's been really, really inspiring for me to meet with all these different founders, and to also kind of like tickling my ADHD to be able to research all sorts of random, disparate, technical fields from week to week. Maybe not as in depth as some people, but still, it's been really cool. So we've been looking a lot at like olfactory tech. I don't know if you've been seeing, there's a lot of these companies in smell-o-vision, basically, or subsets of that things. One, Dognosis, I think, is a really interesting company that is it's a wearables for dogs so that they can detect cancer. There's actually a few competitors that we've met with that are doing similar things. So yeah, like that's just been such a fun part of my job is stuff like that.
Well, I think what's interesting is, those of us that have early experience in sort of even the investment DAOs, or a narrower niche of what DAOs maybe were dreamed of being used for in the past, still struggle with the challenge of, the free rider problem, the lack of context, and the idea of people making sort of consensus-based decisions on very small amounts of information. And so my sense was that Aiden was really this development that was solving that main problem, where if you have a small number of people who are very active and the majority aren't, can be tough to actually make really good decisions. And I think we've talked about Aiden before on the show multiple times, and I've had an early look at it for a while, and it's exciting to see you guys are ultimately investing. But it seems like it's running right at that challenge mostly, right, where you can really pull in all this information to really deep dive, like premier analyst level context building on what a deal might look like, and what it might be worth, and et cetera. And then really limiting the human involvement to truly the edges of that decision making.
Yeah, I think it's still definitely important to have a human in the loop at this point. And I still have overall concerns that the systems will reinforce, not necessarily biases, but reinforce consensus just because of whatever it's in its training data. But I do think that the hybrid approach probably will yield better than either on its own. And I think the idea of it becoming fully autonomous in the future is interesting. Yeah, I don't necessarily believe that capital allocation is something like chess. I also don't agree with Mark Anderson saying that, venture capital is going to be the last profession. I think that's unlikely as well. But yeah, it's complicated for sure. But the reports that Aiden is putting out are really, really, in depth and interesting to read. It's like a great starting point if you're doing your own research on it as well. So, even as just a tool to help people, it's clearly doing.
I mean, yeah, it's been out for maybe a month now. I'm curious, does the hypothesis feel validated, or is there still kind of a long way to go on the tech side or kind of community participation side for that to happen?
I think both things need more validation for sure. I think there's certainly, I have personal concerns just in the consistency of the reports. Sometimes they vary from times to time, depending on how much material you run, even on the same company. So, I think there's going to be a lot of questions there. And this is just something that's, intrinsic to these systems. They're not deterministic. And you have to kind of just learn how to work with that constraint, or just not even a constraint, but just, reality. And I think also, we're still trying to get more network members, the activity. It's also August, so, but yeah.
We know.
Yeah.
It's August. Right. Maybe before we let you go, I'm curious to talk a little bit about Cloudy Heart. I think you framed it as an experiment in connecting two flywheel ecosystems, music and meme coins.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the insights that have maybe...
Well, the insights are that it's very hard to connect those flywheels, and that they run on incredibly different timescales, and that in general, cultural capital is just not very fungible with the crypto ecosystem, or it is, but it has a very wonky exchange rate, I guess is what I would say. And, certain, let's say, celebrities or certain kind of just like institutions don't have, no one cares in CT basically. And then certain ones, they care a lot, but not vice versa. So it's been a challenge. That being said, there's an album coming out, there's a film coming out. Those things take a long time. So it probably, in CT terms, it feels like probably been kind of dead, but there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes. It was a really, really fun first few weeks when we really were kind of like actively managing perception. And I had never, we didn't do the botnet as medium thing quite, but there was interesting kind of social media performance aspects to it that I really enjoyed, where we were kind of, getting musicians involved to interact in certain ways and stuff like that. And it was cool to see kind of how crypto could enable this sort of like just fluid collaboration. And tokens, when they're doing well, are a great way of aligning a bunch of people together. And then as soon as they're not doing as well, they're not a great way of aligning people. I think we all know this is the issue with tokens. So, that's the story with any token you launch for the most part, or 99% of them anyways. But it's still active team, still a pretty interesting project, I think, and a lot of potential for it to develop into a lot of different things going forward, both in John's practice and in, all of the people who worked on it, kind of individual projects as well. There's also one of our developers, Cameron. He came up with a project called Mirror Stage, which is like a autonomous AI live streaming open source toolkit integrated with Pump, but more coming soon there. But I don't know if you check it out, it's pretty compelling stuff. You can do basically like deep fake level AI streamers. They react to chat. In theory, you could plug it into any other API and have a AI live music making, gaming, etc. I definitely think this is going to be a big category. Okay. Entertainment. So
I mean, it can replace me, so I don't have to get up early to be
exactly.
Live on the internet.
Yeah, totally. No, I'm always looking for ways of making myself obsolete. So
Amen.
Yeah.
All right, Daniel. Amazing conversation. Thanks for going down the winding path with us. Appreciate you hopping on. And I think you mentioned a few things. Aiden, go give it a check
out
that
Aiden,
out.
Check out Cloudy Heart. Check out Mirror Stage. check out Sloptimism.
Sloptimism.
Yeah.
Right
Do you have
on.
the domain yet? Sloptimism.com?
I do own it, but there's nothing there. I
Okay,
just squatted
nice.
it. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay.
I love it. That's, I mean,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah. Optimistic, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, brother. Best of luck.
Bye.
Cheers.